Hey guys, what's up? It's Ripe again, back with more stories. In this video, police raided the wrong house and threw a flashbang into my living room. Here is what happened. Let's dive right into the stories. And the first one is titled, I broke up with my fiance and he says he will call the police if I take our cat with me when I move. So me and my ex found a kitten in the backyard back in June. I've been paying for all of her food, litter, toys and carrier, and I'll be paying for the vet appointment too in a week for the entire time we have had her. I have proof and store receipts of me paying for all of her things. He has not paid a single cent for her, he never has money and has had 3 different jobs since we moved in together in March. I'm leaving him and he says I cannot take her with me. He also does not clean her litter box or feed her and I have video proof. He also trashes the room and never cleans it, and I have video proof of that too. If I left her with him, she would be all alone all day for 5 days a week. For the 2 days that he is home, all he does is play video games all day. He says if I bring the cat with me when I move, he will call the police. What can I do? And yeah, Ripe stars, now we will read some comments that give advice. The first one said, when he calls the police they are going to say this is a civil case, so just take the cat. Don't tell him you're taking her, just take her. He is trying to bully you and the cat appears to be the one thing he thinks he can use to control you. Don't fall for it, about all he can legally do is sue you for the value of the cat. A stray kitten has little monetary value. Even if he did have a case for theft, which he doesn't, I certainly would not leave the cat with him, and to hell with the consequences. OP replied, I see, so there could be a court case in the future? Another person said, small claims at most. If he did call the cops, they would tell him, with maybe a straight face, but possibly not, that this is a civil matter, don't leave the cat with him. Update, so on my last post, a lot of people had also mentioned that I should make sure I would not be responsible for the lease when I move and maybe I should have explained the situation a little bit more. Me and my ex rented a room in a house, we have a live-in landlord who's pretty lax and another roommate. He is very understanding and I would not have been responsible for the lease after moving out even if my ex did not pay. I also remember someone else asking how it was possible that I have proof of him not doing things, and well, I basically had blog videos of the days and the timestamps of the litter box not being cleaned and me cleaning them up and text messages and videos of me having a conversation with him about how I'm the only one taking care of the cat and him admitting it on camera and in text. That was the proof that I had. Today my ex moved out. When I made my last post he said he was gonna stay and pay rent without me, but before the month was up he decided to move back in with his parents. Today his whole family came to the house to take his things into a U-Haul. His father came at me cursing and yelling in my face, which I have videos of, and his mother came into the room and took my cat's cat tree that the landlord gifted to me. That's fine because I've already ordered the exact one and it's coming in a few days. They are insane people and I'm glad to have them out of my life. The cat is with me, by the way. I took her to the vet the other day and got her vaccinations and got her chipped and registered in my name, and when my ex found out he was very mad, but he would not have been able to afford $581 charge anyway. My ex also said that he was gonna take all of my things back that he bought for me when we first started dating, like my Xbox and my TV and my headset, but I flat out refused and told him that I legally don't have to give those things back, and he did not try to fight me on those because he already has his own Xbox and TV and he wouldn't have room for double of everything anyway, so yeah, that was the update. I got my cat, I have all my things, and he is out of my life for good until I have to take him to court to fix the whole front bumper and hood of my car for crashing into a dining room table chair on the highway when I let him drive my car home from work, but that's a whole nother story. And yeah, Ripe stars, I'm glad that OP got the cat and got rid of that guy. I suppose she dodged a bullet. Anyway, the next one is the title story and it's titled, Police raided the wrong house and threw a flashbang into my living room. 2 years ago I moved into a new place with my second husband. I have 2 children from my first marriage, both girls, and when my husband, who works for the government, got relocated, it was only natural that we moved with him. Soon after that we had a son, but sadly he was born premature and had asthma. My husband could not take time off his work, so my daughter did everything to take care of him, and me, I also had quite a few stitches after delivery and couldn't walk or stand for long. The neighborhood we live in was quite calm and unhappening, which was honestly perfect for me. There was not a lot of criminal activity or instances of break-ins or anything like that, which is why none of us were prepared when something even worse happened. So it was a rather quiet evening because my son's condition was slowly but surely improving, which meant my daughter could also rest and I was not spending all my waking hours being anxious about my children. My girls were downstairs playing a board game and also watching over their brother when I heard loud bangs on our door. I instantly got up from my bed, but I couldn't walk fast because of my stitches. I had barely waddled out of my room when I heard a loud crash. From the top of the stairs I could see officers in SWAT uniforms holding a battering ram standing behind our now broken door. But at that moment all I could hear were the cries of my daughters. Before I could even try and talk to them, I saw flashes. I had enough knowledge to know that the officers had deployed flashbangs. I tried to slowly make my way down the stairs shouting, "Please stop, there are kids in the next room! Please stop with this!" But it all fell on deaf ears as officers came barging in with their guns aimed. I could not raise both of my hands because I needed one to grip the rail and support myself, but I still raised the other and continued begging to them. "Please, my son is just 2 months old, he has asthma." Again, they didn't listen to me and went inside the room where my kids were. I could hear the officers murmuring something about the house, but I couldn't hear much before the other officers were raising their guns at me and shouting at me to get down. "I gave birth 2 months ago, I have stitches so I cannot walk quickly, please understand." I don't know if they actually understood what I was saying because they tried to rush me down, but thankfully no one pulled me. Then they put me in handcuffs and tried to drag me out, but I resisted, continuing to plead to them. "My kids, they are in the other room, one has asthma, the other 2 are just 5 years old. Please, there's so much smoke, he cannot breathe." One of them seemed to finally listen and went in the direction of the room as I was eventually dragged out. I kept telling them that it was only me and my children here, and when they questioned how I could afford such a nice place, weird question in my opinion, but I was too stressed to think about it at the moment, I told them that my husband worked for the government. I could still see smoke inside and I was so close to a panic attack when the officer came out and told me that my children were fine. They asked me about my husband, his name and workplace before finally bringing me inside. My daughters were both crying, one was holding the baby while the other was trying to fan the smoke away. I was devastated to see their eyes red and how they kept coughing, but the worst of all was my son, who I could not even see, breathing. I held him and pat his back a few times, which made him cry a bit, but he still kept choking. I asked my daughters to hold my dress and follow me out. I rushed over to the paramedics and told them about my baby and my daughter. They barely looked over my daughters before saying that they looked fine and unharmed, and they assessed my baby for a few minutes before declaring that he was unharmed with only nominal breathing issues that will naturally get better. If I didn't know how these officers could get, I would have started shouting at them, but knowing that causing a scene would only harm me and my children further, I kept quiet and hoped that they would call my husband, but they didn't. Instead, they took us to the hospital and did not even let me call for my husband. There, my daughters were looked over and given some eye drops, and my son was checked for his asthma and any other trauma. Soon, all 3 of my children were given the clear, and they told me that the raid had not caused any of them any harm or issues. Again, I highly doubted that, but I kept quiet. When I was finally allowed to go back home, I found my husband's car approaching the hospital. I was so relieved then that I started crying because everything from my children's screams to their pain and to my own stitches hurting was just so overwhelming for me. My husband rushed over and carried me to the car as my mother-in-law and father-in-law took care of the kids. He drove us to another hospital that's familiar to us where my stitches were looked over and my kids were properly checked. We found that one of my daughters had a glass shard embedded very close to her eyes from when the windows blew out. My other daughter thankfully only had irritated eyes, but our son was in critical condition. He needed oxygen and had inflammation and irritation in his lungs along with swollen and dry eyes. Shards of glass had thankfully not touched him, but there was a strange bump on his forehead that was slowly swelling up. Doctors concluded that he hit his head against something hard. When I asked my daughters, they said that they did not drop him or bumped his head, but when the officers came, they were not being gentle with any of them, and my daughters couldn't see what they were doing to their brother. Of course, my husband and in-laws were furious. They told me to catch some sleep, and my sister-in-law was looking over the kids in the other room. I don't know when I fell asleep, but I woke up to my mother-in-law next to me. When she noticed that I was awake, she helped me sit up and gave me some soup. She also informed me that my husband had filed a case against the SWAT officers for their negligence. Apparently, they were investigating a case of human trafficking and had intel about someone housing the criminals in their house. However, they got the wrong address. My in-laws took care of me and my children for the next few days as my husband urged for investigation into this case. Several body cam footages and even our front door CCTV camera footage showed officers not waiting before busting open the door. It also showed someone questioning if they had the wrong house and one officer talking about how to hold a baby. My stitches thankfully healed and so did my daughter's wound, but my son was still having trouble breathing. He needed even more oxygen and the chemical reaction around his eyes was going down, but very slowly. I saw my husband again after 3 days. I remember crying for like 3 hours in his arms as he held me and tried to make me eat. The next morning, my husband again went away to inquire about the case. The news had reached other neighbors and they were all protesting against the insensitivity and recklessness shown by the officers. Several NGOs for women and children and even some private groups were forcing for deeper investigation into the matter. It got so bad at some point that government officials were starting to get involved. The police department was sued, and even as they denied any accountability for my children's condition, it took only a few weeks for the officers to be fired. I don't know what strings my husband pulled and I never asked because I wanted to put this nightmare behind us. But I was thankful that those officers won't be in power anymore. Their faces and names were also shared on Facebook around my locality, which meant it would be very difficult for them to ever hold a respectable position again. And the next one is titled Petty Revenge for Ex-Girlfriend. This was back in 2016 and I'd started going out with a really good looking girl who was a bit younger than me. We were at a restaurant bar once waiting for a table and having cocktails. I ordered a gin tonic and I must admit it looked a bit over the top. The bartender dude wanted to impress and put a lot of fancy things in the drink. You know, like floating little flowers, some pink peppercorns. New girlfriend says, "Are you really gonna drink that? It looks very gay for a man." I hate homophobes and was kind of shocked, and I know I should have just broken up with her right there, but she looked so good. I thought I could teach her a lesson, so she went to the toilet and I told the bartender, "Man, I'm gonna order something real simple, but you gotta fancy it the F up to make it look as rainbowy as possible." So when she got back from the toilet, I ordered a screwdriver and the bartender dude properly delivered. He gave me a screwdriver with a peacock and half a rainforest coming out of it. New girlfriend was not very impressed, so the next day I ordered a bunch of mini cocktail umbrellas online and I always kept a few in my pocket whenever I would go out with her. Shot of Jägermeister, I managed to stick an umbrella there, bottle of beer, mini umbrella in it. I put so many mini umbrellas in all sorts of non-umbrella friendly drinks, I must still have some photos somewhere. She always looked kind of embarrassed about me drinking those. I ended up breaking up with her a few months later. I met her back in January and she is now deeply religious and I think I dodged a bullet there. And yeah, Ripe Stars, if you have watched until here, I would very much appreciate it if you could like the video, leave a comment and subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you so much, your support means the world to me. The next one is a petty revenge story. It starts like this. My granddad used to own a piece of land next to a horse track. Their land almost surrounded my granddad's except for him having access to a heavily trafficated public road. The racetrack was laid out in such a way that their exercise track was placed north on my granddad's land while the main track with the stadium was placed to the south. Way back when the racetrack was built, they had asked my granddad if they could transport their horses across his land. There was already a maintenance road in place and as they only moved their horses, he did not really mind as they also supported the local village. As a small thank you for this, they allowed him and his guests to watch the races for free, and normally it cost around $5 in our local currency, not that much, but it allowed him to take me and all my cousins to watch the horses for free. Anyhow, fast forward a couple of years and my granddad passed away. My mother, who inherited the land, tried to bring her grandchild, my niece, to the racetrack to see the horses just as my granddad used to do. At the counter she is told that she now has to pay for admission, not really that big of a deal as she thought that they didn't know that she now owned the land. Afterwards, however, when she writes to the track to rectify the situation, they tell her that she won't be admission free as it was a one-time deal they had struck with my granddad that was now off. So enter the petty revenge. A few months later, when we had planned to cut down some of the trees for lumber, my mother told the contractors to accidentally leave 1 or 2 logs across the maintenance road. The racetrack now having to load their horses on trolleys as they had to use the busy public road instead of our maintenance one, almost immediately sent an email to my mom apologizing and offering her that same deal as my granddad had received if we would remove the logs. She only informed them that the one-time deal they had struck with my granddad was off. In the end, after some wrangling, we ended up with a deal where they now have to pay my mom around $400 every month in addition to her and her guests having free admission. And yeah, Ripe Stars, that's exactly how you get petty revenge. Props to that mom, she is an absolute legend. Either way, the next one is a malicious compliance story. So I lived with an entitled roommate and her brother for a year. Well, almost a year before I was kicked out. Let me set this up a bit. She is disabled with a chronic autoimmune disease. She is on disability and doesn't work. Her brother hasn't worked a job ever as far as I'm aware, so he is on welfare. He was a nomad for 9 years and came to live with his sister when she was diagnosed a year before I met them and moved in. I know, I'm honestly kind of an idiot for not seeing the signs. For what it's worth, I work full-time, we got along quite well. In general, it didn't really bother me that they would take my food, coffee, pasta, butter, milk, eggs, cheese, etc. you name it, or that I was often asked to take care of the dishes even though 80% of them were hers and her brother's, not mine. I felt for her and was fine with helping them out. The problem was, I was happy. I was working hard, making money, writing music and starting a new romantic relationship with an old friend. She was not happy. I would give her gifts and food and friendship, but it wasn't enough to counter her jealousy and I guess something just snapped. I came home on March 20th and before the door had even closed behind me, she said, "Please OP, you need to move out." Why? You just do. This is my house. She paid the same rent I did and was often late. My brother works hard at being her caretaker, I guess, and he deserves his own room. There were only 2 rooms, mine and hers, and he lived in our living room. So you just need to figure something out. So here comes my malicious compliance. I knew she expected me to stay for April. She and her brother would really have to squeeze their funds to make it work to pay the upcoming full rent. Her brother didn't pay while I lived there. But was I about to stay in the home for 5.5 grueling weeks with someone who had randomly turned on me, kicked me out of my home, and in retrospect guilted me into giving them household help and free food? I don't think so. I applied for 30 houses that day alone. By the weekend I had signed a new lease. If you ask me to get out, no problem. I'll be out ASAP. I got my security deposit back from my landlord who passed that info on to my roommate. She stormed into the kitchen, "So you just got your security deposit, do you have somewhere else to live?" Me, "Yeah, I signed a lease yesterday and I have arrangements to move all my stuff 2 days from now." "So you're not paying for April?" Me, "No, that was the last time we ever talked." She stormed out of the room, said a few choice words about me to her brother and slammed the front door. I almost felt like she expected me to hand her a $800 gift wrapped and still get out of her space. I did not stay in my room ever again. I moved out quickly and quietly, and I have not heard from her since. Don't tell me to move if you're not ready to pay the full rent. By Felicia. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. Where I live in Asia, we don't actually have HOAs, but for lack of another term, I will just use it. It's the same concept where you can give monthly money to them and they claim they will use the money to help the neighborhood. It actually happening that way can be hit or miss with a lot of stories regarding stolen money or even the HOA turning into almost a gang. I wanted no part of it because I don't make a ton of money and I cannot justify just giving it to people on the hope that it might benefit me in some unspecified way. Despite not being a part of it, they figured that they could still control me in some way. They made a huge list of rules that they expected everybody to follow. That might be fine for the people that were actually members, but since I did not join, I did not see any reason for me to follow the rules. A lot was basic courtesy that culture taught us all to do at a young age. Some were more specific, but the one that is important was the rule regarding the home color. They had a list of acceptable colors for painting both the outside and inside of homes, and anything aside from that list is not allowed. I am what a lot of people might call eccentric. I call it being creative, and since it does not affect anybody else, there's nothing wrong with it. Starting with the outside of my house, 3 of the walls are white, which are totally acceptable. For one of the side walls, I decided to go all out one day and paint a mural on the wall. A ton of different colors that I'll even admit don't go well together. Still, I own the house, and if I ever wanted to sell, I could cover it up. The HOA did not like the wall and told me several times to cover it up, which I refused since I don't have to listen to them. The real kicker came with what they told me about a few days after that. HOA, we wanted to talk about your wall colors. Me, I told you before that I can keep my mural since I'm not a member of your organization. You cannot force your rules on me. HOA, we were talking about the walls inside your house. We can see at least a couple of them are lavender, which is not an acceptable color on our list either. We are adding that to the things you need to change to meet our standards. I knew the walls they were talking about, and it meant at least one of them had looked through my windows, which made me feel very uncomfortable. I did not have proof though, so I didn't want to pursue anything unless they continued to harass me about the wall colors and joining. For now, it was a little neighborhood dispute and nothing legal. Not long after that interaction, I got sick and I started to feel some intense abdominal pain. It got to the point that I was on the bathroom floor sick and I needed to call an ambulance to be taken to the hospital. They found that some of my intestines had a blockage and blood was not flowing to them. They had to remove a portion of my intestines in a surgery. After that surgery, I ended up getting a bad infection, which kept me at the hospital even longer. It was miserable and kind of gross, so I will spare you any further details. In case anybody was wondering, by the time I got out, I was totally fine and I'm okay now. While I was sick, the HOA woman decided to take advantage of me being in the hospital by fixing my house herself. Gossip spread fast and she knew that I was not gonna be home for a while. You might think that she painted over my wall or even broke into my house to paint the indoor walls as well. Well, that would make even too much sense for somebody like her, and instead she decided the entire wall must go. So she had the entire walls removed, and without it the house structure could not hold and the entire thing collapsed. I came out of the hospital to my house being gone because she decided to get the walls removed. The first thing I wanted to know was how the hell she managed to get anybody to agree to remove the side of my home. That's not something you can do yourself, you need professionals with tools and equipment. By the way, just to clarify, in case some people were wondering, she did not only remove some of the walls, but she also damaged the overall structure of the house, which I suppose led to the collapse. So it turns out she had a cousin that ran a construction business and convinced him to remove the wall. I was beyond angry and I sued the HOA for the cost of my entire home and what it would be to rebuild. In court was actually how I found out who she had to tear down, and I decided to sue her cousin too, because he had no right to do that and it went against the law. Just starting with that, first I got a small settlement and his business got shut down because of that, and a few other instances the court found they did illegally. Back to the HOA lady though, she was trying to argue in court that she didn't need to pay me for the house. Now, she actually wanted to settle and claimed that she would take responsibility and pay for the one wall he destroyed. Just the one wall, claiming it wasn't her fault, it being taken down caused the rest of the house to collapse. She also wanted to offer an amount that was so small it did not even equate to replacing a wall. She was acting as if she put a hole through the wall or just broke a window. The scale of what she did was not in her mind. I refused to take that money and I instead wanted to sue her for the full amount I deserved. She claimed in court that her rules for the neighborhood demanded the certain colors and I didn't comply with those rules. I was not a member and she could not dictate anything about my property, not to mention she was already found guilty of destruction of property for my home, so she had to pay me in the end around $475,000. This would cover the cost of my house and expenses for me needing somewhere to stay since I obviously could not live in the rubble. For the destruction of property, she was sent to prison. I don't know if she could have gotten a lighter sentence, but her seeming to have no remorse and to the end claim that she was in the right did not help her either. She really claimed that it was my fault for having my wall be that color and not listening to her. At least I don't need to hear her comments anymore since I would never go visit her in prison. As for my house, I did get it rebuilt and just to spite the HOA that was left, I decided all the walls needed a ton of color. It looks a little like a mess, but it is growing on me. And yeah, ripe stars, these HOAs, or rather the equivalent of what they are here in Asia, seem to be, at least in some parts of the continent, just as bad as the ones in America. Either way, if you like the HOA stories, please don't forget to like the video and maybe even leave a comment because that would make me and Disney very happy. Thank you so much. And yeah guys, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to check out my podcast by searching for Ripe Stories on all major podcast platforms such as Spotify, Apple or Google Podcasts. Furthermore, you can find bonus content by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or by clicking the join button here on YouTube. For a small monthly fee, you will get access to dozens and dozens of exclusive videos you won't find anywhere else. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.